didn't think food could make you afraid of your own body. I've worked kitchens since I was 16. I know the smell of onions going translucent. I know the sound of a fryer when it's happy. I know the quiet panic behind a server's smile when a table asks for something that isn't on the menu. What I didn't know was how fast a place can turn into a slaughterhouse without anyone bringing a weapon. The restaurant was called Harbor House, a mid-priced spot near the water in a city that pretends it's a tourist town even in winter. We served seafood, steaks, and comfort food dressed up like it mattered. The owner, Adam, liked to say we were honest food. That was his phrase. Honest food, honest people, honest prices. He used the word honest the way some people use blessed. If he said it enough, maybe it would become true. That Friday was a mess before it even started. A storm had flooded the old delivery route, so the seafood order arrived late. The refrigeration truck had problems. The boxes were damp. The driver was pale and apologetic, which meant he already knew he was handing us trouble. We should have rejected the order. Adam didn't even hesitate. "We're not eating the cost," he said. He said it in front of everyone, like he was giving a lesson. I was sous chef. I was supposed to be the practical voice. I opened a few boxes. The ice looked half melted. The fish didn't smell rotten exactly, but it didn't smell clean either. There was that faint sweetness that makes your stomach tighten if you've been around enough raw protein. "Adam," I said quietly, "this is risky." He smiled at me like I was a nervous child. "We'll cook it through. We've got standards." Standards. Another word he liked. I didn't push harder. I wish I could say my silence was complicated. It wasn't. It was rent, and the habit of swallowing your instincts to keep your job. The dinner rush hit with the storm. People love to watch bad weather from a warm room with hot food. We were packed. The line was loud, a little stretched, but normal. We moved through tickets like we always did. Adam came back around 7 with an idea. "We're doing a special," he said. "On what?" I asked. "Clam chowder. Big bowl. Cheap price. We'll move the stock." I stared at him. "The clams are the risk." He lowered his voice, which was his way of pretending he was being reasonable. "If we don't move them tonight, they're a total loss. And I'm not losing payroll over a maybe." I've heard 100 versions of that sentence in this industry. We made the chowder. The first pot looked fine. The second pot smelled faintly like low tide. The third pot, because he insisted on a third pot, I salted more than I should have, trying to drown whatever was wrong. The servers flew out with steaming bowls. By 8, the first complaint came in. A woman at table 12 was nauseous. She said the chowder tasted metallic. The server brought the bowl back to the pass and looked at me like I was personally trying to kill her. I tasted a spoonful. The flavor was off, sour under the cream. 86 the special, I said. Adam said, "No." He put the bowl in the trash and told the server to comp the table dessert if they wanted it. He didn't even look at me. The second complaint was worse. A man in a business suit vomited in the restroom. The bartender heard it. The hostess had to help his wife to a chair because she was shaking. Word spread quickly the way disease does in a crowded room. Still, Adam wouldn't pull the special. I could feel the staff starting to split. Some of them just wanted to get through the night. Some of them were watching Adam with the kind of hatred that's quiet and total. At 9, my own stomach started to turn. It was subtle at first, like I'd swallowed a coin. I blamed stress. I chugged water. I kept moving. By 9:30, the kitchen air felt too thick. The smell of cream and bacon and clams turned my mouth dry. Then the first ambulance showed up. You don't forget that sound. The siren was muted by the storm, but we heard it. A server ran into the kitchen, breathless. 2 customers collapsed, she said. They're saying it's the chowder. Adam went out front. I followed. The dining room was still full, but everyone had been pushed into a tense hush. The collapsed customers were by the windows. One was a young woman with a knit hat, her face slick with sweat. The other was a man who looked like a longshore worker, heavy shoulders, hands like old rope. He was curled on his side, gasping. Paramedics knelt beside them. The young woman kept trying to say something, but it came out slurred. Adam stood too close, asking questions that didn't matter. A paramedic looked up and said bluntly, "Stop serving whatever they ate." Adam nodded like he'd already decided that on his own. He didn't say a word to the crowd. He came back into the kitchen and told us to keep cooking other dishes. I felt something break in my patience. "You're shutting this down," I said. He stared at me, and for a second I saw fear in his eyes. Then it hardened. "You're not the owner." That was the moment I decided I would walk out at the end of service. I didn't know I wouldn't get the chance. The next hour was chaotic. Customers started leaving, angry or pale or clutching their stomachs. Some insisted they were fine. Some were already sick in the parking lot. The bar tried to keep normal noise going, but it sounded fake, like laughter in a haunted house attraction. By 10:30, the second ambulance arrived. At 11, the police came. They didn't storm in with drama. They walked like people used to scenes that disappoint them. One officer asked to speak to Adam. Another wanted the kitchen manager. Adam gestured to me. I gave them our invoices. I told them about the late delivery and the refrigeration issues. I didn't soften it. Adam shot me a look like I'd betrayed him. I didn't care. The officers asked us to stop service immediately. We locked the doors and turned the sign. The staff gathered in the kitchen. Rain hammered the vents. The fluorescent lights made everyone look sick. "That could bankrupt us," Adam said. "What about those people in ambulances?" The dishwasher, Luis, snapped. "Don't talk to me like that," Adam said. Kim, one of our servers, started crying. Not quietly. The kind of crying where your whole face goes red and it's hard to breathe. "I served it," she said. "He made me." Adam opened his mouth to defend himself. That's when he doubled over and vomited. It was sudden and violent. He hit the mop sink and splattered the floor. The sound was awful, wet and desperate. For half a second, nobody moved. Then half the staff started to gag. I felt an icy realization crawl up my spine. We'd all been tasting it. We'd all been breathing the steam. I'd had at least 3 spoonfuls across the night. The kitchen turned into a chain reaction. People ran to the restroom. People grabbed trash cans. Someone knocked over a tray of clean glasses. The sound of breaking glass got lost under retching. I didn't vomit yet. Sometimes your body waits until you're alone. The police officer at the back door asked if anyone needed medical attention. Kim couldn't answer. Luis was already on his knees, sweating. I told them we'd manage. I was lying. I drove home in a daze. My hands were shaking on the wheel. The streetlights smeared in the rain. At my apartment, I kicked my shoes off and made it 3 steps before my stomach flipped. I fell to my knees in the bathroom. When it came, it felt like my body was trying to purge my career. I kept vomiting until my throat burned and my eyes watered. Then the cramps started. I've had food poisoning before. Everyone who works restaurants has. Usually it's miserable, but it's a story you tell later. That time you ate questionable sushi. That time you rolled the dice on a street taco at 2 a.m. This was different. This felt targeted. The pain came in waves so sharp I had to bite down on a towel to keep from screaming and waking my neighbors. I lay on the cold tile between trips to the toilet. At some point I passed out. I woke up with my phone buzzing. Kim, are you okay? Luis, I'm at ER. Nora, line cook. Adam is blaming us. I tried to type back, but my hands were clumsy. Another text came in. Unknown number. You should have shut it down sooner. I stared at it. I asked who it was. No reply. I set the phone on the sink and tried to focus on breathing. In the morning, I dragged myself to urgent care. They gave me fluids and told me to watch for dehydration and fever. The doctor said the restaurant was probably under investigation. Outside, the air was bright in that cruel way mornings can be after a disaster. I slept most of the day. When I woke again, there were news alerts. Multiple hospitalized after suspected food poisoning outbreak at Harbor House. The article was careful with language. It used phrases like under review and possible contamination. It quoted a city health official. It didn't mention Adam's decision. It didn't mention how many times I said we should stop. I expected that part. The public story always gets cleaned up like a menu worded to hide what you're actually eating. What I didn't expect was the second wave. By evening, Kim called me. Her voice was thin. They discharged me, she said. I can't stop shaking. Go back if you need to. I think someone followed me home. I sat up too fast and got dizzy. What? I saw a man outside my building. Same one I saw near the restaurant after we closed. He was just standing there in the rain. Maybe he's a reporter. She laughed once, short and humorless. Reporters don't look like that. I wanted to ask what that meant, but I was too tired to play the guessing game. Lock your door, I said. Call the police if you see him again. She hesitated. Do you think Adam did something? Like, do you think he's paying someone to scare us? Adam was cheap to the bone. He'd rather yell than pay for intimidation. I don't know, I said. After we hung up, I checked the staff group chat. Nora had posted a screenshot of a message. You were complicit. No number attached. Then Luis posted one. Your hands served poison. People started replying with nervous jokes and angry emojis. That lasted about 5 minutes. Then Adam, who had been quiet all day, typed, "Stop sharing this nonsense. We need a unified story." A unified story. As if we were a brand recovering from a bad review. I left the chat. That night my fever spiked. I had a nightmare that the chowder was still in my stomach, expanding like wet cement. The next morning, I decided to go back to the restaurant. I wanted my knives. In this industry, your knives are an extension of your arm. The good ones are expensive and personal. Mine were in my locker at Harbor House. I also wanted to see what the place looked like in daylight, when the storm had passed and the adrenaline was gone. The parking lot was empty except for 2 city vans. A yellow sign from the health department hung on the door. Closed pending investigation. I expected that. I didn't expect the smell. You'd think after a shutdown, the place would smell like disinfectant and cold steel. Instead, it smelled like the chowder had soaked into the walls and refused to die. I knocked. After a moment, Adam opened the door just enough to show his face. He looked worse than I did. His skin had a gray tint. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a man who'd been punched hard and recently. "What do you want?" "My knives." He opened the door and stepped aside. The dining room was dark. Chairs were stacked on tables. The bar lights were off. The silence was thick. We walked through the back. There were 2 men in suits in the office. They didn't introduce themselves. One was on the phone. The other stared at a folder. Adam muttered, "Lawyers." My locker was where I'd left it. I opened it. My knife roll was gone. I checked again, stupidly, like it might be hidden behind my apron. "Where are my knives?" I asked. Adam frowned. "I don't know." His tone was too quick. Before I could argue, one of the men in suits stepped out. "Are you the sous chef?" he asked. I was. "We need to ask you questions." I started to say I was leaving. Then I noticed a dark stain on Adam's sleeve. It was brown-red, dried. My first thought was vomit. Then I saw his hand. 2 of his knuckles were split. Someone had hit him. Or he had hit someone. My mouth went dry. "How many people are in the hospital?" I asked the suited man. He didn't answer directly. "We're still receiving reports." "Did anyone die?" Adam snapped. "Enough with the drama." The suited man gave him a look that shut him up. "We have reason to believe this incident may not be accidental," the man said. I let that hang in my head for a second. "You think someone did this on purpose?" "We're not prepared to make a public statement." That was a yes without saying yes. I felt my pulse quicken. The second man in a suit came to the doorway. "Detective Morrow is on his way," he said. Detective, not inspector, not health official. Detective. The room seemed to tilt. I kept thinking about that unknown text. You should have shut it down sooner. I thought about the way the chowder tasted wrong from the start. I thought about Adam insisting on a third pot. While the two men argued in low voices, I slipped into the walk-in. The air inside was cold enough to make my teeth ache. I scanned the shelves. The clams were gone. The fish order was mostly untouched. Labels had been peeled off some boxes. Then I saw something that didn't belong. A white 5-gallon bucket, unmarked, sitting behind the milk crate stack. I pulled it forward. The lid was sealed tight. I shouldn't have opened it. But curiosity is part of the job. You learn to identify danger by smell, by texture, by color. I pried the lid with a spoon. The scent that hit me was sharp and chemical, not food at all. My eyes watered. It reminded me of a cleaning aisle, of strong disinfectant. But there was something else under it, a sour, meaty undertone. I leaned closer. Inside was a slurry of pale liquid and chunks of something that looked like shredded fat. And floating near the top, partially submerged, was my knife roll. The fabric was soaked. My first reaction was relief, stupidly. Then I saw the handle of my boning knife. There was a thread of hair stuck to it, and something darker in the water that looked like tissue. I backed away fast enough to bump into the shelves. The door to the walk-in opened behind me. Adam stood there. He didn't look surprised. "Close that," he said. "Why are my knives in that?" I asked. His face twitched. "For evidence." "Evidence of what?" He stepped closer. "Of your panic," he said. "Of your disloyalty. Of your weakness." I stared at him. "You're sick." He smiled in a way I'd never seen on him. Not the fake hospitality smile. Something colder. "You think you're the moral one because you said risky a few times? What is in that bucket?" He didn't answer. He reached for the door handle and shut us inside. The latch clicked. The sound was small. The fear that followed was not. "Adam, you were going to walk," he said, "after you helped me cook it, after you tasted it, after you watched them eat it. I tried to stop it. You didn't." He leaned in close enough that I could smell stale bile on his breath. "People always want a villain you can point at," he said softly. "If this turns criminal, they'll take whoever looks the most convenient." "That's you." He laughed. Then his hand went to his pocket. He pulled out my paring knife. The blade was clean, but his knuckles were still split. "I'm not going to prison for chowder," he said. The way he said it made my skin go cold. Because we were not talking about chowder anymore. We were talking about bodies. I backed toward the shelves, my mind racing for anything I could grab. In the corner was a box of frozen scallops, another of fries, a tray of vacuum-sealed steak. All useless. Adam took a step forward. "Who else have you told about the delivery?" he asked. "No one." "Who else did you text?" "I didn't." He raised the knife a little higher. I saw then that he wasn't just trying to intimidate me. His eyes had the same flat look I've seen in dead fish. He had already decided something. I lunged for the shelf and knocked a stack of containers down. Plastic clattered. He flinched. I grabbed the only thing within reach with some weight, a frozen bag of shrimp. I swung it hard. It hit his wrist. The paring knife skittered across the floor. We both went for it. He was faster. He shoved me into the metal rack. A sharp edge caught my shoulder. Pain flashed white. I heard myself make a sound I didn't recognize. He got the knife. Not the paring knife. My chef's knife. He had pulled it from the bucket before coming in. The blade was streaked with something dark. I froze. That was my knife. I had sharpened it last week. I had used it to slice lemons for a garnish plate. And now it looked like it had been used on something softer. Something that wasn't food. "Adam," I said, my voice small. "What did you do?" He didn't answer. He drove the tip into my thigh. The pain was so sudden I couldn't process it. I fell. He put a boot on my ankle to hold me down. "You're going to say you were coerced," he said, breathing hard. "That you were scared. That you didn't know." I dash. "Say it." I didn't understand what he wanted. My mind was stuck on the simple fact that my leg was bleeding. He pressed the blade a little deeper. "Say you did it." Something in me kicked awake. Maybe survival. Maybe pride. No. His face hardened. He lifted the knife. The walk-in door banged. A voice from outside. "Hello? Anyone back there?" Detective Morrow, maybe. Adam's head snapped toward the door. For the first time, uncertainty touched his eyes. I used the moment. I grabbed a metal pan from the floor and slammed it into his shin. He cursed and stepped back. I crawled toward the door, dragging my injured leg. The latch was high. I reached for it, fingers trembling. Adam grabbed my hair and yanked my head back. I screamed. The door opened. Light spilled in. A uniformed officer was there. For 1 second, relief hit me so hard I almost sobbed. Then Adam moved. He was between me and the officer in a blink, my chef's knife held low. The officer barely had time to react. The blade went into his neck. I heard a wet gasp. The officer stumbled back, hands clawing at the wound. Blood spilled brightly against the white-tiled threshold. Adam shoved him into the hallway and slammed the walk-in door shut again. We were back in the cold, back in the dark. Adam looked at me like I'd forced him to do it. "You see," he said. "Now it's real." My body shook uncontrollably. I wasn't sure if it was fear or the lingering sickness. Outside the walk-in, I heard shouting, then footsteps running. Adam crouched near me. "Listen," he said quietly, as if we were two cooks discussing a recipe. "This will be simpler if you cooperate." I couldn't speak. He touched the side of my face with a wet hand. "You wanted honest food," he whispered. "This is honest consequence." My stomach heaved again, not from illness but from horror. He stood, wiping the knife on his apron. And somewhere in the kitchen beyond the walk-in, someone started screaming. Not one scream, several. The sound rose and broke, messy and human. Adam tilted his head, listening, and smiled. I didn't see the officer die for long. Adam slammed the walk-in door, and the cold swallowed the sound. The world shrank to the hiss of the fan, and my own breath coming out in panicked bursts. Blood was pooling under my leg. I pressed both hands over the wound, trying to apply pressure the way you do in movies. It didn't feel heroic. It felt pathetic. "Help!" I shouted. My voice came out thin. There was noise outside, people running, someone shouting for an ambulance, a chair crashing. Adam must have stepped out to lock the back corridor because the handle jerked once, like he wanted to remind me I was one motion away from being sealed in a freezer with a murderer. I dug my fingernails into the rubber mat and dragged myself toward the door. I'm not strong like that. I'm not some hidden action hero. I'm a cook with bad knees and knife calluses. The only reason I moved was because the alternative was letting Adam decide what story my body would tell. My fingers reached the latch. I pulled. The door opened into chaos. The kitchen was half lit. The suited men were gone. 2 more officers were near the office, one on the radio. Nora was pressed against the prep table with her hands over her mouth. Luis wasn't there. Kim wasn't there. The officer who'd been stabbed lay on his side near the dish station. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. Adam stood over him, not frantic, not pleading, not shocked. He looked like someone checking inventory. He turned when he heard the door. Our eyes met. That was the moment when I understood something important. He wasn't improvising. This wasn't a desperate man who'd snapped. He had been walking toward this for a while. "Get away from him," one of the officers shouted. Adam lifted both hands, still holding my chef's knife. "I'm the victim here," he said. He said it like he'd practiced it. "You need to step back and drop the weapon." Adam looked at the knife like he'd forgotten he was holding it. Then he did something calm and horrific. He placed the knife into the dead officer's hand. Then he stepped away. I heard one of the cops curse. I tried to speak, but my throat locked. The other officer moved toward me. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" "Adam stabbed me," I said. It came out as a flat statement because my brain was still catching up to my mouth. Adam made a small sound of disbelief. "She's delirious," he said. "We all got sick. She collapsed in the walk-in. I was trying to help her. That officer came in. He saw a knife. He panicked. The words came too smoothly. I stared at him. "You killed him," I said. Adam shook his head slowly, like I was embarrassing myself. And then the worst part happened. One of the cops looked at me with a flicker of uncertainty. Not belief, not disbelief, uncertainty. In that tiny gap of doubt, Adam had room to move. He grabbed a metal tray from the nearest rack and slammed it into the other officer's face. The officer went down hard. Adam vaulted over him and ran. I shouted again. Nora screamed. Somebody in the dining room started crying. The remaining officer chased him toward the back exit. I could hear their footsteps skidding on wet tile. I tried to stand. My leg buckled. The world went gray around the edges. Nora ran to me. "Don't move," she said. "Where's Kim?" I asked. "I don't know. She came in earlier after you left the group chat. She said she wanted her purse from her locker. Adam was already here with those suit guys. Then the cops showed up and everything blew up." My skin prickled. "Where's Luis?" "Hospital, I think." My brain had started making a list of who was accounted for and who wasn't. It was the kind of list you make after an accident, not after a murder. The officer who'd been hit sat up, dazed. Blood ran from his nose. Nora was talking fast into a dispatcher's phone. I tried to focus. The back door slammed. Then another sound. A car engine revving too hard. Adam was gone. The cops called it a manhunt later. At the time it felt smaller. It felt like we had just opened a cupboard we'd never dared open and found a nest of venom inside. An ambulance arrived for me and the injured officer. They loaded the dead officer onto a gurney with that careful, respectful speed that says the adrenaline is still there, but the outcome is fixed. As they wheeled me out, I saw the health department sign on the front door flutter in the wind. "Closed pending investigation." It looked absurdly polite. In the ER, they stitched my thigh and started IV antibiotics as a precaution. I told them everything. The late delivery, the special, the bucket, the texts, Adam locking us inside the walk-in. The detective who eventually interviewed me had tired eyes and a voice that sounded like he'd had to repeat bad news for a living. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. Who would Adam want to blame? I thought about that. "He wants to survive," I said. "Yes, but survive with what story?" The answer came too easily. "He wants a scapegoat." The detective nodded. He didn't tell me I was right. He didn't need to. 2 hours later, my phone blew up. Nora had been questioned. Kim was missing. And Adam, according to a police bulletin circulating online, had left the restaurant in his car and was considered armed and dangerous. My first reaction was panic. My second was rage so clean it felt like a blade, because I could already see the headlines forming. Restaurant tragedy turns deadly. Staff dispute leads to violence. Food poisoning case complicated by internal conflict. A storm of passive language that would make what Adam did sound like weather. I asked the detective if I could leave. He said I shouldn't be alone. "I'm not staying here," I said. "Do you have anyone who can be with you?" I didn't. I had an ex who lived 2 neighborhoods away, and a sister who worked night shifts in another city. So I went home anyway. I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch with the lights on and listened to rain come back in a soft, persistent way. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You want the truth? Go to the place where the clams came from." I stared at the message until my eyes burned. The place where the clams came from. The supplier. The fish truck. I assumed it was a troll. Then another text. Unknown number. Adam didn't start with the chowder. Then another. Unknown number. He practiced. I should have given the phone to the police immediately. Instead, I did the stupid thing I always do when my fear and my curiosity meet. I answered. "Who is this?" The typing bubble didn't appear. The reply came instantly, like it had been cued. "Someone who got sick before you did." The message chilled me because of one detail. Before we served the special. Before that Friday. I was about to call the detective when my doorbell rang. I froze. People don't ring at that hour unless something is wrong. I limped to the peephole. Kim stood in the hallway. She looked half drowned. Her hair was stuck to her cheeks. Her arms were wrapped around herself like she owed her body an apology. I unlocked the door. She stepped in and immediately started shaking. "Where have you been?" I whispered. "Running," she said. Her voice cracked. I sat her on the couch with a blanket and water. She drank a few swallows and then pushed the glass away like it could betray her. "He has my phone," she said. "Adam?" She nodded. "What happened?" Kim stared at the wall. "He asked me to come in early this morning, before the cops. He said he wanted to get ahead of the narrative. He used those exact words. He said if we worked together, we'd be protected." That sounded like him. "He wanted us to sign statements," she continued. "He already had them typed. He wanted me to say I saw you tampering with the chowder." My stomach turned. I said no, she said. He smiled. Then he locked the office door. My skin went cold. He asked if I had been the one sending messages to the group. I said I didn't know what he was talking about. Then he told me I was lying and showed me my own phone. How did he get it? He took it off the host stand last night. I didn't even notice. I'd been throwing up. She leaned forward. He had photos on it. Screenshots of the delivery invoices. The ones you sent me last week when we were joking about the supplier being late. He said you were building a case against him. I was just complaining. He doesn't see the difference. She exhaled shakily. Then he said he needed one more piece of proof. Proof of what? That you were a threat. I waited. She swallowed. He cut himself, she said. I blinked. With what? Your chef's knife. He wrapped his hand in a towel. He said he was going to say you attacked him. I felt nauseous. He made me watch, she said. He told me if I walked out, he'd say I helped you. Kim. I said I'd do whatever he wanted. I lied. The second he opened the door, I ran. Her eyes finally met mine. I'm sorry, she said. I should have fought him. I should have screamed. That's not on you. She nodded like she believed me only halfway. I called the detective from the ER. Kim told her story again. The detective's voice shifted from tired to alert. He told us to stay inside and said officers were on the way. We heard sirens 30 minutes later. While we waited, Kim asked the question that had been circling both of us. Do you think he meant to poison people from the start? I thought about the bucket, the chemical smell, the peeled labels, the 3 pots, and his expression in the walk-in, like he was reciting lines. Yes, I said. Kim flinched. But why? She asked. Money doesn't explain this. No. I didn't want to say what I was thinking. Some people don't need profit. They need power. They need to be the axe and the judge. The police arrived and took Kim to a safe location. They asked me if I wanted to leave my apartment for the night. I said no. Stubbornness has always been my ugliest survival trait. They posted an officer in the hallway. I tried to sleep. I almost did. Then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He's coming to you. I shot upright. I showed the message to the hallway officer. He radioed it in. 10 minutes later, the building alarm went off. Not the fire alarm. The security alarm for the garage. I heard footsteps in the stairwell. The hallway officer drew his weapon and took cover near the corner. I locked my door and backed away with my heart smashing against my ribs. The steps were fast. Too fast. Then a thud. A grunt. Silence. I waited for shouting. I waited for a call on the radio. Nothing. I moved back to the peephole. The hallway was empty. I opened the door a crack. The officer wasn't at his post. I stepped out and saw him around the corner. He was on the floor. His gun was gone. His mouth was open. His eyes were fixed on nothing. I didn't see the wound at first. Then I saw his throat. A clean cut. Not a messy slash. Something deliberate. Something practiced. The kind of cut you'd make if you wanted the body quiet fast. I backed into my apartment and locked the door. My hands fumbled for my phone. I tried to call 911. No service. That made no sense. I moved to the window. Down in the courtyard, the lights were off. A shadow moved near the garage entrance. I couldn't see if it was Adam. I didn't need to. I knew. The next knock didn't come from my door. It came from the wall. 3 soft impacts. I almost laughed in disbelief, because I had told the universe I didn't want cliché. And here it was anyway, delivered with cruel timing. But the knock wasn't a horror movie omen. It was practical. The wall connected to the service stairwell. Someone was climbing. Toward my floor. Toward my door. I limped to the kitchen. My actual kitchen. The one in my apartment. I opened a drawer. The biggest knife I owned for home cooking was 8 inches and dull in a way you only notice when you're scared. I grabbed it anyway. The door handle rattled, then stopped. Then a voice. Open up. Adam. He sounded calm, like he was asking me to let him in to talk about next week's schedule. I didn't answer. You're bleeding at home, he said. You're tired. You're sick. This can be simple. I backed away. I can pin this on you cleanly, he continued. I already started. I have your knife. I have your history with the supplier. I have you on camera tasting the chowder. You don't have that. I will, he said. I realized then that he wasn't just threatening legal blame. He was threatening to manufacture a video story to make my life look like the accident around his intent. You killed a cop, I said. So did you, he replied. My throat went dry. That's not even believable. Believable is a mood, he said, not a fact. I heard something scrape, metal against metal. He was doing something to the lock. I rushed into my bedroom and pulled my dresser in front of the door. It was heavy. My legs screamed with pain. I hated the thought that I could bleed out in my own apartment while the man who served poison to strangers narrated my downfall. The lock clicked. The door opened a few inches. The dresser held. Adam cursed under his breath. Then the worst sound of all. He laughed. "I don't actually need to get in," he said. I froze. "What?" He didn't answer. I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall. I didn't believe it was over. I listened hard. A new sound drifted in. The building's gas line alarm. A thin, urgent beeping. My eyes widened. Number. I ran to the kitchen and smelled it immediately. The faint, sharp scent of gas. He was turning my building into his alibi. He didn't want to kill me quietly. He wanted to get rid of me in an event. A tragedy. An accident. A headline. I threw open my windows. I yelled into the hallway to evacuate. No one answered. I grabbed my phone again and ran to the stairwell window for a signal. 1 bar. I dialed 911 and got through long enough to choke out my address and the words gas and Adam. The call dropped. I didn't wait for confirmation. I shoved the dresser aside and limped into the hallway. The dead officer was still there. His gun was missing. I forced myself not to stop. The stairwell door was propped open. I ran down as fast as my leg allowed. Halfway down, I heard an explosion. Not from my floor. Lower. A booming sound that punched the air in my lungs. The building shook. Dust and grit fell from the ceiling. Someone screamed below me. I fell on the steps, catching myself with one hand, the other gripping the railing so hard my knuckles burned. The emergency lights flickered on. I kept going. When I reached the lobby, the smell of smoke edged into the gas. Sprinklers were going off. People were stumbling out toward the street. I pushed through them. Outside, 2 fire trucks were arriving. Police cars followed. I scanned the crowd, then saw Adam. He was at the edge of the sidewalk, holding the hallway officer's gun and a towel. He looked like a man who had just escaped something terrible. He was already performing. I limped toward him. He saw me. His expression didn't change. He raised the gun. For a heartbeat, I believed he would shoot me in front of everyone. But he didn't aim at me. He aimed at the ground near my feet. He fired. The crack of the shot sent people ducking. Then he threw the gun. It clattered across the pavement. He screamed, "She has a knife." He screamed it with the same conviction he'd used to sell honest food. 2 officers tackled me before I could even lift my hands. My home knife skidded away. Someone pressed a knee into my back. I gasped. My words got swallowed by the crowd noise. Adam sat on the curb, head in hands, a picture of devastated innocence. I understood in that surreal second that he had a full script for this night. If he couldn't kill me cleanly, he'd bury me under confusion. The detective who had interviewed me in the ER arrived minutes later. He took one look at me, then at the dead hallway officer being wheeled out on a stretcher, then at Adam. He didn't shout. He didn't show emotion. He simply asked for everyone to step back. He ordered Adam separated from the scene. Then he walked over to me. "You called about gas," he said. "Yes." "You said Adam?" "Yes." He nodded. He turned to the officers restraining me. "Ease up," he said. One of them hesitated. "Detective, the witness says—" "I'm aware of what he says," he replied. He leaned down to me. "Where is your phone?" "In my apartment. I dropped it in the stairwell." "Do you have anything that supports your account of the texts?" "No." "Kim does," he said. My heart stuttered. "What?" "She got her phone back. We recovered it from Adam's car." I wasn't sure I had heard right. The detective continued. "He's been texting from an app that spoofs numbers. We traced it." Adrenaline washed through me so hard I almost felt light. The detective stood. "Put her in an ambulance," he told the officers. "Not in cuffs." Then he walked across the street to where Adam was being questioned. I watched from the stretcher. Adam's posture stayed soft, wounded. The detective said something I couldn't hear. Adam shook his head. The detective gestured toward a second set of officers arriving with a sealed evidence bag. Adam's face changed. Not wildly, just a small, involuntary twitch of the jaw. The mask slipped for half a second. That tiny crack felt like justice. At the hospital, I finally learned what the police were piecing together. The chowder hadn't just been made from borderline clams. The lab found traces of a concentrated cleaning agent mixed into the base. Not something that would get in by accident. Someone had poured it in, on purpose. The 5-gallon bucket had residues matching the chowder pot, and Adam's fingerprints were on the lid. They also found something else in his office. A notebook. A thin spiral with grease smudges on the cover. The detective didn't show it to me, but he summarized the contents. Adam had been keeping records of test meals, dates, symptoms, recovery times. A progression. He had apparently started small, making staff meal stew too salty, then too spicy, then accidentally undercooked. He'd watched reactions, tracked who complained, who shrugged, who got admitted to urgent care. He wrote about resilience. He wrote about optimal confusion. He wrote about a controlled narrative event. The detective didn't need to say the rest. Adam had been rehearsing the shape of disaster, not for money, for ownership of the story. That week blurred into interviews and stitches and news alerts. Adam was arrested and charged with multiple counts: poisoning, assault, murder of a police officer, attempted murder. There were more victims than I'd known. The chowder had hospitalized dozens. A handful had landed in ICU. 2 older customers died from complications. That part hit me hardest. Not the cop, though that haunted me. Not my leg. The elderly couple who likely chose the chowder because it sounded warm and familiar. Because they trusted a menu. Because we're all trained to believe food is safety. The city went hungry for a villain. Adam was easy to hate. But the media still tried to scrape blame off him and smear it around the staff. A morning show panel asked whether cooks had a moral duty to walk out. I watched it from my couch and wanted to throw the remote through the screen. As if we all have emergency savings and union protection. As if the people making your food are allowed to be heroes on demand. The detective asked me to testify before the preliminary hearing. I agreed. The courthouse smelled like old paper and stale coffee. Adam sat at a table in a clean suit that didn't fit his shoulders right. His lawyer had told him to look humbled. He did. When it was time for my statement, I limped to the stand. He looked up at me. For the first time since the walk-in, he looked genuinely angry. Not because I was hurting him, because I had survived the story he wrote. I told the truth. I said I warned him. I said I failed to push harder. I said he locked me inside the walk-in and stabbed me. I said I watched him kill an officer. I said my knives were in a bucket of chemicals. I didn't soften it. I didn't dramatize it. I simply described what happened in the order my body remembered it. Adam's lawyer tried to imply I was out for revenge with a grudge about a promotion I'd never gotten. I stared straight ahead. The judge shut that line down quickly. After my testimony, I left through the side exit. Outside, Kim was waiting for me. She looked better. Still tired, but present. Luis was with her. He walked like he'd aged a decade in a week. We stood together without talking for a while. Finally, Luis said, "He used to bring me coffee every morning." I nodded. Nora joined us a minute later. "Do you think we'll ever work a kitchen again without thinking about this?" she asked. Kim shrugged. "I already do," she said. I caught myself checking the fridge temp at home like it was a crime scene. We laughed a little. Not because it was funny, because we needed the sound of something normal. The trial dragged on for months. The official story was tidy by the end. A disgruntled, controlling owner, evidence of premeditation, a guilty verdict. People said it was over. I tried to let myself believe that. I took a job in a smaller place. I didn't touch chowder. I didn't even look at clams. My leg healed into a deep, angry scar that liked to ache in cold weather. One afternoon, about a year later, I was breaking down a fish shipment at my new job when I noticed a detail I hadn't seen in a long time. A supplier label. Same company name as the Harbor House delivery. I felt that old coin drop in my stomach. I asked the manager if we could switch vendors. He raised an eyebrow. "Is there a reason?" I considered saying no. I considered letting my fear become private. But I had learned what silence costs. "Yes," I said. "I have a reason." He didn't ask for details. We switched. That night I walked home with the kind of exhaustion that feels earned. There was a new message on my phone. An email this time. No sender name, no subject. Just a short line in the body. "You did shut it down. Eventually." I stood on the sidewalk and read it 3 times. My first thought was that it was a reporter. My second was a prank. My third was the one that made me sick. Adam had been convicted. But prison doesn't erase influence. Some people leave fingerprints on other people's minds. I deleted the email. Then I went upstairs and locked my door. In my kitchen, I opened my fridge. I checked the temperature. I checked the dates. I smelled the milk. I washed my hands. I washed them again. Then I sat down at my table and stared at nothing for a long time, because the scariest part of the whole thing wasn't the blood. It wasn't even the poison. It was the way I had nearly let someone else write the truth for me, and the way the world is always hungry for a tidy narrative, even when the real story is messier, even when the real story tastes wrong from the first spoonful. I thought that would be the last time his voice got into my head. It wasn't. After the apartment explosion was contained, the investigators walked me through the timeline like they were arranging evidence on a stainless steel counter. They kept asking the same thing in different ways. When did his behavior change? Was he ever violent before? Did he talk about revenge? Did he ever mention the health department? I answered as honestly as I could, which meant I had to admit the ugly truth. Adam had always been a small tyrant, but small tyrants look normal in restaurants. He was the kind of boss who corrected your posture while you plated food. He watched how servers rested their hands on tables. He disliked bartenders who laughed too loudly. He cared about the lighting of the dining room like it was a moral issue. We called it attention to detail. What it really was, in hindsight, was practice. I gave the detective my laptop. I let them go through my emails and texts. I gave them the staff schedule, old invoices, even personal notes I'd written about the menu changes. The more I handed over, the more I understood how hard it is to prove intent when someone uses ordinary business arguments as camouflage. In a restaurant, a lot of bad decisions look like just another Wednesday. The city health department called me in for a statement too. The investigator was polite and tired and kept saying I was not under suspicion at this time, which sounds comforting until you realize it's a sentence built for revision. I told her about the late delivery and the melted ice. I told her Adam forced the special. I told her what I smelled when I opened that bucket. She didn't flinch. She had probably seen worse. When she asked why I hadn't walked out earlier, I couldn't give a clean answer. Because I thought the worst-case scenario was a lawsuit, I said. She wrote something down. I wondered if it was my words or my guilt. I went back to work too soon. I told myself I needed routine, that being around food again would reclaim it. The first week at the new place, I couldn't eat anything that wasn't sealed in packaging. I watched the cooks taste sauces with the same spoon twice and felt my pulse leap. I watched a manager cut corners on a rice order and heard Adam's voice telling me standards were flexible if payroll was threatened. I started seeing patterns everywhere. A sour smell became a threat. A wet delivery label became a warning. A casual joke about rolling the dice on leftovers made me feel dizzy. I laughed along anyway. Habit is powerful. At night, the sickness came back inside my head. Not the cramps. Those faded. The feeling of betrayal by something as basic as soup. I dreamed of bowls that never emptied. I dreamed of cream thickening into something that clung to my throat. I dreamed of being in the walk-in again, the door handle on the outside framed like a small, cruel halo. The therapist the department offered me kept trying to get me to say the words traumatic event out loud. I refused. It felt too neat. It felt like the kind of phrase a news anchor uses before signing off. What I could say was simpler. I told her I felt like my judgment had been used against me. I told her I felt like my hands had been borrowed. I told her I couldn't stop remembering that I salted the third pot. I had tried to bury a warning under flavor. I had tried to fix a crime the way you fix a recipe. On the day Adam's formal charges were read, I sat in the back of the courtroom with Kim and Luis. He looked smaller in custody. Not sorry. Just annoyed that someone else had the clipboard. The prosecutor listed the counts in a steady voice. Tampering with food products, aggravated assault, first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, attempted murder, arson. Every time she said another charge, Adam's lawyer touched his shoulder as if to keep him from rolling his eyes. Kim held my hand so hard it hurt. Afterward, outside the courthouse, cameras were waiting. A reporter asked me if I felt responsible. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say yes. I said the truth that sat between them. I feel angry that he thought our work would hide what he was doing. That clip played on local news for days. Some people praised me for speaking up. Some sent messages calling me a coward. One anonymous account suggested I had been Adam's partner and turned on him when the plan went bad. I stopped reading the comments. If you stare into the public long enough, it becomes its own poison. The biggest break in the case, the detective told me later, came from a place none of us expected. A former prep cook from Harbor House came forward. His name was Rafi. He'd quit 3 months before the chowder night. He said Adam had asked him to do taste tests after hours, not normal menu development, not staff meals, just small bowls of soup and stew with strange notes, too bitter, too astringent, too cleansing. Adam framed it as a new wellness angle for the menu. Detox chowder, Rafi joked during his statement. He said Adam had kept a stopwatch on the counter. He said Adam asked detailed questions about how fast nausea hit. He said he thought Adam was trying to create a marketing stunt, something edgy to get attention. Rafi's voice shook when he told the detective the last thing Adam said to him before he quit. You're not useful unless you're honest about your symptoms. Hearing that made me feel hollow, because it wasn't random. Adam had been doing controlled harm in the same building where we toasted birthdays and complained about the printer. You can live next to something monstrous and still call it routine. That knowledge settled on me like grease you can't scrub off. When the trial finally started, I had to testify twice. Once for the poisoning, once for the murders. It's strange how a courtroom makes violence feel both huge and small. The photos were shown briefly, carefully. I didn't look at them long. I didn't need to. I had the sound of the officer's wet gasp stuck in my memory already. Adam's defense was predictable. He claimed he was sick. He claimed the chemicals were part of a misguided attempt at deep cleaning after the delivery issues. He claimed he panicked when officers arrived. He claimed I was unstable. He claimed Kim had misunderstood him. He claimed Rafi was lying for attention. He claimed, improbably, that the apartment gas leak was an unrelated infrastructure problem. He tried to turn everything into coincidence. Coincidence is a useful word for people who want their intent to look like bad luck. The prosecutor's cross-examination was patient and merciless. She walked him through his notebook entries. She asked why he'd timed staff test meals, She asked why he'd peeled labels. She asked why my knives were in a chemical bucket. She asked why his fingerprints were on the lid. She asked why he had Kim's phone. She asked why security footage showed him carrying a gas can into my building's garage. When she said that last part, the courtroom went absolutely silent. Adam's head lifted sharply. For a second, he looked less like a businessman and more like a boy caught stealing. Then anger flooded back in. He said loudly, "You're trying to make me a monster." The prosecutor didn't raise her voice. "I'm trying to show the jury what you did," she replied. That line was clean enough to be a slogan. It still made me exhale like I'd been holding a breath for a year. The verdict came on a gray afternoon. Guilty on all major counts. The judge read the sentence in measured tones. Adam was given life for the murder, with additional decades stacked for the poisoning and arson. He didn't cry. He didn't plead. He leaned toward his lawyer and whispered something that made the lawyer's face go tight. As they let him out, Adam looked at me. Not with hatred, not with fear, with something worse, as if he was still convinced he could revise reality if he stared hard enough. I went outside into the cold air and leaned on the courthouse wall until the world steadied. Louise sat beside me. Kim stood with her arms wrapped around herself. Nora arrived late, out of breath, having rushed from a shift. We didn't hug. We didn't make a speech. We just stood there while the city moved around us, full of people who would never know our names, but would remember the headline. In the following months, I tried to rebuild a relationship with food that didn't feel like a hostage situation. I started small. Toast, plain rice, eggs cooked until the whites were set and the yolk was a little jammy. I avoided cream soups. I avoided anything that was served in a deep bowl. I avoided anything that reminded me of warmth that could turn on you. I also stopped lying to myself about what I owed future versions of me. If a delivery smelled wrong, I said so. If a manager pushed a questionable special, I said no. If a coworker laughed at first aid protocols, I corrected them. Not because I thought I could prevent all harm, but because I refused to be trained into silence again. The last message I received came on the anniversary of the incident. Not from an unknown number. From the City Victim Support Office. They forwarded me an email from a family member of the older couple who died. It was short. They said they didn't blame me. They said they knew I'd tried. They said their parents had loved chowder. They had ordered it because it reminded them of a trip they'd taken 30 years ago. The kind of memory you warm up in your mouth like a story. I read that email and cried in my kitchen standing over a pot of plain water. I didn't reply. I just let the words sit in me, heavy and honest. A few nights later, I made clam chowder at home. Not from a packet, not from a restaurant. From scratch. I went to a market I trusted and asked questions I didn't used to ask. Where were the clams harvested? How were they stored? When did they arrive? I watched the fishmonger's face for irritation or patience. He was patient. I washed the shells until the water ran clear. I soaked them and waited for grit to purge. I cut potatoes into cubes with a slow, careful hand. I cooked the bacon until the fat rendered clean. I stirred the pot and tasted it with a fresh spoon every time. The first bite of the finished soup didn't make me feel brave. It made me feel tired. And then quietly, it made me feel like my body belonged to me again. I don't tell this story to scare people away from restaurants. I tell it because we're taught to treat food poisoning like a punchline. We're taught to treat exploitation in kitchens like a rite of passage. We're taught to accept that people with money get to gamble with other people's stomachs. Adam didn't invent that culture. He weaponized it. That distinction matters, because there will be other Adams. Maybe not as extreme. Maybe not with a notebook full of experiments. But people who believe they can rewrite consequences with branding and confidence. I won't pretend I'm fearless now. I still check fridge temperatures. I still smell milk like it's a witness. I still flinch when I hear a walk-in latch click too loud. But I'm not silent, and that's the closest thing to closure I've been able to cook.